3 years ago, I spent my life savings on what I thought was a solid boat. I'd stepped away from a 6-figure job to go live on the water, and I spent the first year at sea, going through storms and rough weather and experiencing some of the most beautiful and calm days I've ever had. But during this year, it was becoming more and more apparent that the boat wasn't in such a good shape as I'd first thought. And a year later, it was finally time to haul her out to deal with the issues. This is that story. So it is early morning here. We're being lifted out in about an hour. I'm looking forward to seeing her up on the hard. We haven't lived on land for pretty much a year now. Still on a boat, but on land. You wanna go for a walk? You wanna go for a walk? Okay, let's go. We were being lifted first thing in the morning. I was a bit nervous seeing the boat come out of the water. In my mind, I saw the boat breaking in half, but I'd paid for them to use double the slings, and that gave me some comfort knowing that the boat would be cradled. At 7 in the morning, the lift started moving, and it was time to get lifted up on the hard. The lift operators pushed her into the slings and got her ready to be lifted. Little did I know that this was going to be the last time I'd see her in the water for a very, very long time. She was caked in enough muscles to feed a small town, even though I'd had someone dive on her in the spring and myself going down and scraping her during the summer. I'd been hauling all of that up the river, and I'm really curious how much speed I lost with all of that in tow. With the hull clean, it was time to move her to her spot in the yard. I was sitting out in the front, a spot for the boats that were just coming in for a short period and then quickly going back in the water again. They rolled her over, brought her in to her temporary spot, blocked up the keel and cradled the hull. Now she was finally ready to be worked on. Well, she is up on the stands. Now it's just getting to work. I soon have a guy that's gonna come take a look at the boat. Looking forward to seeing what he has to say. We'll see how much we can get done during these 2 weeks. As I was waiting for the shipwright to come around, I cleaned up what was left of the mussels and started to poke and prod at the hull. There were a few obvious spots where water would likely have been coming into the boat, as it was now coming back out. And garboard seam, the planking seam closest to the keel, didn't appear to have any caulking in it whatsoever, and that was later confirmed when the shipwright came around and started reefing out the seam. There was nothing in there, other than silt and goo, which cemented my suspicion that the garboard seam had been one of the major spots where the boat had been taking in water all this time. What once was cotton is now is gunk. To save money, I decided to help out as much as I could, so I borrowed his tools and started reefing out the seams that needed clearing. And for those of you who aren't familiar with boat building terms, reefing a seam means to go in with a hook and remove what's in there, usually cotton or oakum. I also started poking around some of the planking just above the waterline. It was obvious it was getting old, and it looked like it was soon time to replace them. After that, I inspected the crack that I'd found in the transom when I was diving on the boat earlier in the summer. This was one of the main areas the shipwrights were going to take a look at. At this point, everything seemed largely fine other than the seams needing recaulking, some old planks that would need to be replaced within a year or so, and a little suspicious spot in the transom. It would take me a while to realize just how bad the boat really was. After spending the day getting my hands dirty, it was time to eat some dinner and call it a night. So I got this bottle of wine for saving a couple's dog that was swimming around in Falls Creek. So I have a dog in the water here that looks unsupervised. So I gotta go see if we can pull him up. Looks like we have a dog. Hey, anyone on board? Yo, is this your brown dog here? Yeah. Yeah, I just pulled him out of the water.
Come on, Corking. Load up. Come on, get on. Appreciate it. Yeah. Come on, get in. Load up. Load up!
First day on the hard. Cheers. That's good wine. And it even got a dog on it. I enjoyed my wine and my egg salad sandwich, blissfully unaware that this was just the first day of years to come in the yard. Eventually the shipwright started corking up the boat again. I helped out where I could, rolling oakum, filling plug holes, and painting the seams. At this time I had no real plan on becoming a shipwright, just help where I could to save some money and absorb some of the knowledge to get to know the boat a bit better. But my goal was to patch her up and get her back in the water again, so I could keep living out there. While the shipwrights were corking her up, I kept picking at the stern, and it got pretty obvious that something wasn't right back there. The ends of the planks were falling apart and I could stick a knife straight through. With the advice of the shipwrights, we decided to patch it up and leave it for next season. The idea was that I would haul out again and change the planks that were getting punky. I wasn't 100% comfortable leaving this kind of damage so close to the water, but I was reassured it was gonna be fine for at least a year. But then one day, when I was out practicing corking by the boat, a guy showed up. He ran a wooden boat business in the yard and he was looking for people to join the company. He'd just landed a contract to restore a large historical wooden ship, and he needed people to help him out. Specifically, he needed someone to run the marketing and media side of things, because he wanted to document the project. And there I was, newly arrived on a wooden boat full of camera gear. So now I had a decision to take: get the boat done on time and get it back in the water and head out there again, or stay in the yard and take a job at a wooden boat company. I wouldn't be making as much money, but I'd be learning a lot about these boats. And right during this time I realized something. The diesel tank for my stove had ruptured when they lifted the boat out of the water, and the diesel was coming through the planking. That meant that I didn't have a stove for the winter, and to replace it, a big part of the interior would have to come out. I was weighing my options: to keep pursuing my dream of living on the water, or stay on the hard for what could be a couple more months, get the boat in a bit better shape, and learn a thing or two about the issues I was facing. After a lot of pondering, I decided to take the job. I was suddenly thrown into the deep end of the world of wooden boat building. The ship was in incredibly bad shape and was slated for a full rebuild, and my job was to catch each moment. This gave me an opportunity to see the inner workings of a ship, to see how every part was connected to the other, and to watch how old parts were used as templates to make new. In the evenings I would study, and I started doing some minor woodworking here and there. The last time I'd built anything out of wood, I was about 14 years old. Once the yard figured out I was staying up for a longer period, they moved me, and on my request they put me down right in front of North Star. In the early days of winter we had a few really cold days, and one day my whole freshwater system exploded. The pipes burst, the water filters exploded, and the freshwater intake to the engine cracked. This was a major mistake on my part. I had not expected the temperature to get this cold inside the boat. A mistake I'll surely never commit again. This meant that from now on I didn't have access to running water. Life just became a whole lot more Spartan. During this time I'd had these gnawing thoughts, wondering what was really going on down in the stern. From the inside it looked pretty much fine, but I obviously knew that something was going on down there. It was just a matter of how big was the problem. So I was weighing the option of taking apart what the shipwrights had done, but I was worried of what I would find and whether I would be able to put it back together again. But I figured it was now or never. At least I was in a place where I was surrounded by people that knew what they were doing, people that I could ask for advice. So one day during the winter I decided to undo what the shipwrights had done. To take off the block of wood they'd put in front of the hole, to start exploring to see what was going on inside the stern. I was cracking the lid of Pandora's box. So I undid the work that I had paid for, removed the screws, pulled off the wooden block, and started reefing out the cotton and goo that was hiding inside the hole. This was the point of no return. I was committing to dealing with anything I would find in there. I quickly realized that if I was going to rebuild the stern, I would also have to redo a bit of the planking. So to give myself access, I decided to remove the rub rail. The end of the rail had been replaced at some point fairly recently, but behind the rail it was obvious that the planking was in pretty rough shape. A thing I'd gotten quickly familiar with is something called iron sickness. It's something that happens to wood when iron, like in this case nail fasteners, starts to rust inside the wood. The iron then reacts with compounds within the wood and starts to deteriorate and break it down, making it brittle and punky and sometimes even muddy. This is a process wholly separate from wood rot, which is always caused by a fungal attack in the wood. I slowly went at it with a chisel and a jigsaw. It was feeling incredibly weird putting a hole in the boat, especially when I didn't have the skills at the moment to know how to put it all back together again. So I've extracted 4 of the planks here to expose these ribs, and yeah, as you can see they're not in great shape. And the same goes for the stern planking here on the fashion piece. So I've taken the decision to continue on here. I'm gonna take down this swim grid and start extracting these 4 stern planks here, and that will give me better access inside the lacerette here. There are at least 1 of these frames on the stern that is cracked. It was now painfully obvious that the rot went a lot further than just the corners of the stern. The frames that I had uncovered were in incredibly bad shape and were rotting from the back side out. The fact that it was rotting in this way made it seem from the inside that the boat was in great shape, and the reason why neither me nor the surveyor had seen anything that looked off. So I started undoing the swim grid. It wasn't without its own issues. A few pieces had rotted out and it was gonna need to be refinished down the line. But I was putting that to the side for now. With the swim grid off, I could remove the metal stands holding it up. As you can see, the planking behind these stands were in pretty rough shape, and the whole stern was going soft. With a bit of prying, I managed to get the stands off, but it did rip out a whole bunch of planking with it. Whatever it was bedded with was holding much better than the wood itself. It was clear that at a minimum the planking that was painted black had to go. So I went at it with a chisel. The more wood I was taking off, the more comfortable I was getting with taking the boat apart. While the planking was beautiful Honduran mahogany, it wasn't worth saving. It'd been sitting in the water for probably close to 80 years. As I was taking the planking apart, I noticed that there was a mix of fasteners in the stern. Bronze screws had been used to fasten the planking, but iron nails and iron bolts went through the whole boat. When you have two dissimilar metals in water, you create a battery. That is basically what a battery is. It's two dissimilar metals sitting in a solution. Different metals have different galvanic potential. That means that they have a tendency to more or less want to release their electrons. And when they do that, they decay. In iron, we see that as rust. And in something like bronze, we see that in the bronze turning pinkish and powdery. But the big issue is when you have this process in a boat, lye starts to form around the fasteners. It's a byproduct of the process, and lye is traditionally used in paper production to turn wood into pulp. The boat was experiencing the trifecta of deterioration: electrolysis, rusting the fasteners and melting the wood, wood rot, turning everything into mush, and iron sickness from the old fasteners, slowly poisoning the wood. The planking was thin and was sitting on top of a layer of plywood that was also deteriorating. It took me a while to take everything apart, and during this time I was realizing how bad the boat actually was. For every piece that I took off, there was another piece underneath that was in even worse shape. It was obvious that the ring timber was completely rotted out in the corners. The ring timber is the piece of wood that runs along the edges of the boat. It goes from the top at the deck, down the planking, along the bottom of the hull, and up on the other side. It was made out of 3 pieces, with blocking pieces on the back holding it all together, and all of that needed to come out and be replaced. While the framing in the stern wasn't as bad, I figured I'd change all of that too while I was in there. The project was getting bigger for every day, and I started having people telling me that I should abandon the boat, crush it and move on to something else. If this is what the stern looked like, then what was the rest of the boat hiding? While I was moving forward, I was starting to have nightmares. I would dream that the boat was stuck on land, or ran aground, or stuck in some weird puddles where I couldn't get it out. The stress was getting to me. At the end of the day, what did I know about boat building, or for that, woodworking? I'd barely held a power tool in the last 20 years. I knew cameras and computers, not this kind of stuff. I would take Atja for long walks to the back side of the yard. There I would sit and think about my decisions and what I was doing. If I was willing to sink all my money and time into this project. If the love for the boat overweighed the issues it had. At least for now it was just a stern, a couple of frames and some planking. At least I had a job here in the yard. And I do love living on board this boat. I was committed to getting the stern back together and then getting her back in the water again. It should only take me a couple of months, at most half a year, and then I'd be back out there again, living on the water. So I disassembled the rest of the stern, opened Pandora's box, and threw away the lid. Now I just had to figure out how to get it all back together again. But that is for another episode. There we go, last piece. Or that's the last piece. Well, that's it for episode 2. I'm really hoping that you enjoyed this episode. Now, before I let you watch the trailer of what's coming next, I'd really like to tell you about my Patreon. So, of course, this channel is supported by you. And by joining on Patreon, you don't only support me in making these episodes, but you also get access to a whole bunch of perks, like bonus content. I release multiple bonus videos for every video that goes up on YouTube. I also have merch in the form of pins, keyrings, and handwritten letters. You also get access to a captain's logbook where I post up-to-date logs of what's going on here in the yard. I also do monthly giveaways on there. Anyways, that's it for my little promo. Now I'm gonna let you watch what's coming up next.